Anyway, welcome back to this afternoon's session. As the board says, I'm Ross Cook, Corporate Director for Economy and Environment. Some of you may notice a slight difference to the photo to now, and I don't just mean the few extra pounds that I've put on since I've been in the role. A little bit plug, I suppose, for Movember. Many of you will know what it's about, but I think particularly in the farming community, when we talk about men's mental health and ensuring that men do actually talk about their feelings. Not always an easy thing to do, but I'm not coming around with the sponsorship form, so don't worry about that. But I will use this opportunity just to flag what Movember's about and hopefully start some conversations. It's certainly done that. More people have looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And that allows us to then talk about what the actual initiative is about rather than thinking it's a permanent feature. But it might be. I'll see it in the end of the month if I can cope with it anymore. So welcome back. As I said, I'm Corporate Director for Economy and Environment, and one of the things I do really like about my title, when I talk to my colleagues in Shropshire, Worcestershire, Staffordshire and Warwickshire, we met recently, mine's the only one that's got that title with Economy and Environment. I think it's a really important message that we talk about in Herefordshire, the fact that we do look at both of those things together. It's not just about growth and infrastructure, it is about our built and natural environment as well, and how we do protect that, but also use it to our benefit as well. So I think that's a really important part. I've been given 15 minutes for this introduction. You'll be pleased to know I won't be using that because we've got a really good lineup for this afternoon's panel, and they've got lots to get through in a fairly short period of time as well. So I will quickly hand over to them. Thank you again to those who've hosted the stands this afternoon over lunchtime. Hopefully you've had a good conversation with most of those and picked up more information, or at least had conversations that you've not had before. So thank you for that. In your booklets you've got the names and titles and roles of all of our panel. So I won't be repeating all those. You can read all about those. So we've got a session. First of all, with each of our panelists will come out and talk for 10-15 minutes-ish, hopefully. We're all nodding roughly, yeah, 15 minutes and we'll give you the nod. And then after that, Kevin's going to host a Q&A for our panel, so hopefully think about your questions ahead of that, and we'll wrap up the session after that. So that's all from me. I think, John, you're first up.
So I farm at Trecorras, which is Langaran, Ross on Wye, Herefordshire. So we're 250 acres small family farm. We're located in the River Wye catchment, mixed arable livestock. So I'm now classified as a regenerative farmer because people like to put things in boxes, and I think that's a box that I've now fallen into. So our regenerative system is really based on nutrition and the soil health. So the main things we aim to do is, with that, we're minimising our soil erosion and improving the health. So this map is courtesy of the Wireless Foundation and some new work they're doing. The white streaks, so it's a map of our farm really, the white streaks in amongst it are all what they would call my danger areas. So these are all areas that we could have runoff into watercourses, which are then attributed to the River Wye. So my journey, I recognised that we needed to improve the soil structure. So my background really was intensive arable farming in East Anglia. We were growing everything from vining peas to parsnips, carrots and potatoes, that sort of stuff. So when I came back to Herefordshire, I sort of thought that I was going to do similar things. And then I soon found out that really that wasn't going to happen. We weren't a big enough enterprise for a start, and also the soils just wouldn't, it's just totally different. So we needed to improve our soils, change the way we farm. So we stood back and said, what we're going to do here, and we realised that our soils were basically dead. They weren't alive, and we needed a living soil. So to do that, I we basically I just stood back, and we weren't making any money. So as I said, we're a small family farm, and I wasn't making any money. So the reality was find ways to change it. So we sold all our machinery. We bought what is called a direct drill, which is a one-pass seeding machine, and that's the only machinery that we ended up with. I then got more into it, and I realised that the fertilisers were doing a lot of damage to our soils and our other synthetic inputs. We introduced cover cropping, and now we follow on from that, and we do a lot of companion cropping. We widened our rotation to 7 years. In that 7-year rotation, we'll have a couple of grasses, we'll have a brassica, a legume, and some cereals. So that sort of carries us right through. We introduced a small herd of native breed red poll cattle, and I sacked my agronomist and employed a nutritionist. So what is a healthy soil? Well, to me, it's a fully functioning biological medium. It's full of life, bacteria, fungi, works in harmony with the crops, makes nutrients readily available to the plants for easy access for them. It supports a plethora of insect life, worms, beetles, microbes, and all beneficial to the plant. So for me, people say about how do you know if you've got healthy soil? All you need is a spade, and then you don't even need to see. People say you need to count the earthworms, see if you've got all the 3 different species or 5 different species of earthworms and all that sort of stuff. All I look for is aggregation. So if I look at that soil and it's got lovely little particles of soil that are all glued together by some sort of magical glue, I know that's a healthy, fully functioning soil. And that's basically, to me, that is what it's all about. So the soil aggregation it makes a major role in the structure of a soil. It's just crucial to the ag system, to just the whole soil life, really. The spores in the soil, the pores in the soil allow for the movement of air and water storage, and the gasification exchange, the creation of habitat for the soil microbes, and allow the plant roots to develop and penetrate. Also, it assists in the nutrient cycling and the transportation of the nutrients. So soils that have high aggregation have more stability, and they're less likely to erosion. They hold the air, the shape, when exposed to other forces like water and excess heat, and etc. So the start of our journey, I've just got a quick picture here. This was taken years ago. If you can see, that's just looks like a bucket of yellow clay, really. And, yeah, so we moved on. So this is only 4 years into the journey, and if this will work, when I talk about aggregation, I don't know if you can see, but you see how we've got particles of soil all aggregated together in this region. So that's enough. So that's fit. So, and I could tell you, I haven't got a nice sunny picture of how the soils are aggregated today, because it's sort of the wrong time of year when I was called in. So the key features of our system, I use no inorganic phosphate or potash on the farm since 2016. We've reduced the soil applied nitrogen by 65%, and that is a benefit both to the soil and to the health of the plants. This has resulted in a substantial reduction in the use of fungicides. We haven't used any insecticides since 2013. We introduced herbal lays. Basically, the herbal lays are on our more non-productive or our high-risk areas of the farm, and now we're into companion cropping with all our crops. The benefits really are sustainability, reduced machinery and fuel costs. When I said we have a one-pass system, we don't move any soil. We just make a slop, drop a seed in. We won't put any starter fertilizer with it as such as a fertilizer, but I will put some carbohydrates, some sugar, some biology, some brewed up biology from my compost, that sort of stuff. So the benefits, we've improved the soil health. Now with the improvement of soil health, you've got carbon capture. People talk about carbon capture, and I'm sure that other people try to make it all technical. It's photosynthesis. you need to capture the sunlight, plant brings it in, gets the carbon dioxide, puts it into the soil. It's not difficult. The more plants you've got growing, the better carbon capture you'll get. And we've increased the drought tolerance of the soil, and we've improved the water capture. And another benefit is we're creating a great habitat for wildlife. Our general practices then, so as I said, we're companion and cover cropping. I try to make it a rule to myself never to have bare soil. So I'm always thinking of innovative ways of getting another crop growing before I've harvested the next one, or planting one into one that's already growing. The companion cropping is something that I got into because I realised that all plants will give exudates into the soil. These exudates will help mobilise nutrients. We're not using any, we're using very little fertilisers. We need these nutrients to be cycling. So I've gone down this line of companion cropping. As you heard this morning, a couple of years in farming to try things is very little. I'm about 4 or 5 years into companion cropping. Whether we'll still be doing it in 20 years' time, I don't know. I feel I'm making progress. We grow a lot of crops for seed. We've now got the seed houses that will accept inspecting our crops for seed with a companion crop growing in them at the same time. And we have actually taken one crop to harvest this time, and the seeds have gone for seed production. So the companions I'll do, we'll grow legumes with our oilseed rape, vetches, and crimson clover, and we'll take them both right through to harvest, and then we'll clean out the vetches and sell the oilseed rape for the oil. So the other general practices, we're making our own compost. We use the cattle manure from the winter. Our cattle are grass fed all summer. They're out on grass all summer. In the winter they have to come in, they're still fed on grass, but we use straw to make manure, and then that manure is our base for our compost. So then on our growing crops, we use leaf applied nitrogen and minerals. We target the applied nutrition. As was mentioned earlier, we have just a little drip feed system, just feed it a little and often. Leaf tests, as was said this morning, pretty well, yeah, it's a bit like as Ben said. SAP tests are very good. The only problem that I have with SAP tests is, and these sorts of things, is it's very slow to get the results. We need a laboratory in Herefordshire. You know, we need to know, I want to know today what the result is of what I'm looking at, not wait 3 days for it to go to Holland and 3 days for it to come back. And we're controlling our pests through natural products, changing the palatability of the plant to stop the pests attacking them. And then the other thing I did was introduce the bees onto the farm. I brought bees onto the farm when the farmers were being criticised from killing all the insects and all the rest of it out with the sprayer. Got a lady in the village who's very vocal. She's very anti-farming. She sees my sprayer, she runs away, puts a mask over her head, etc. And I said to her one day, I said, Steph, I have 25 beehives. Why would I want to go and kill my bees? So I said, I put the beehives there to prove to you that every time I go out with my sprayer, I'm not killing the wildlife. So here, if I can get this pointer to work, so we got some vetches there. We got the main crop here is oilseed rape, and then these leaves here, we got some crimson clover in the bottom. This is one of my successful companion croppings that I love doing. The legumes of the vetches and the clover feed the oilseed rape when it's podding, when we need some energy into it to get some nice seeds. And then at harvest, I can sell the oilseed rape for oil, and I keep the vetches for seed, for growing for my own companion crops and cover crops in with our herbal lays, so I don't have to go and spend money with the seed merchant. So that's the same crop just before harvest. You see all the crimson clovers all out in lovely purple flowers. And interestingly, people talk about ripening times. What I'm noticing is that if you grow these crops together, they'll ripen together, or as one dies off, another one will ripen up. This is our latest companion crop. This is a crop I was telling you about earlier that has actually gone for seed. So the white flowers here, this crop here, and the white flowers are the peas. These peas have actually been grown this year, and they've gone for seed production. And the barley here, which is this plant here, which is planted with it, this has actually made the specification for malting. So it's a win-win to us. The peas yielded the same as the national average, and the malting barley was about 3 tonne a hectare. So we also grow ryegrass for seed. I found that the ryegrass for seed is planted in a very low seed rate, and there's not enough plants over the ground for me, so I companion crop those with just as many different species as I can. But I am learning, and it is all a bit of a trial and error. There are species that you have to think about this. So when this seed crop is inspected in April, the only crop that they want to see in there is ryegrass. So all those companions have to have either naturally died or taken out chemically. We obviously going for the natural system as much as we can, and then the chemistry is very limited. So it's always a bit of a juggle. And we are looking now going forward whether we actually we're looking to plant the grass on wider rows so as we could actually mechanically hoe it. If we do that. The introduction of livestock into our system. So I use the sheep to graze all our crops. They graze our herbal lays, but they also graze the ryegrass for manipulation for heading dates, so as every seed's the same size. It'll also stimulate the seed size. The other thing with the livestock is they will take off all the old foliage, which is great from a disease control point of view. A lot of people think it will set the crop back. This field here was grazed until it was brown. And so they'll recycle the nutrients, and for some reason I was listening to a man from America, and he will tell you that the action of the biting of the sheep or the cattle or animals biting of a crop stimulates the crop to regrow, and it's also the saliva will help with the biology. So our results, so like this crop here, this was that field that was being grazed by the sheep. That had about 120 kilograms of N, total, no fungicides, no insecticides, and that was just coming around in the 9 tonne a hectare. So our cattle, we've got our herbal lays for our cattle to graze. This is where we just introduce as much diversity as we can into the soils. And the cattle are a real good way for me to mop up all the areas that are out of arable production, and also give us some lovely grass-fed beef. Also, as it's something that I got into just because I wanted some cattle on the farm, but now luckily we were in front of the game, and they're a breed, so we use a native breed, and people are coming to me, and we can sell all our heifers for people who want to set up breeds to do the same thing. Interestingly, at certain times of the year the cattle graze different plants, and when they're on the more permanent pasture, which I haven't got a picture of, where all the trees are, you might see them eating the willow trees, or they might go to the oak trees at the end of the season, that sort of stuff. And it just all the time it shows me that all the answers are out there. They're not, it's brilliant. So our bull, just consider he's only ever been fed on grass. So yeah, very proud of Joshua. Right. So our cows and calves, they thrive in their pastures. And as I said, and the other benefit is they do produce the base for our composting. So as I said earlier, so this is how we avoid bare soils. We've got a machine there that will put in, that machine will plant a couple of crops at a time, so two different. So we'll mix up some of the companion crops and then have the cash crop, and they'll be planted together. This front tank here, this is where I put my biology, so the biology will be a liquid form. So we've improved our plant health, and we get fine crops from it, and improving our yields.
John, can you say more about the liquid biology? I've seen it, others might not have done. So it's coloured liquid.
So our the biology that I use as a seed drench will be fermented molasses, probably with humic and fulvic acid in with it, and then we'll take some biology which I'll brew up, which is really bacillus and subtilis that we get that. I get that in a concentrated form, and then we add. I brew it up with some warm water and 5 days with some sugar, and then it's just all bubbling away and fully alive. And the idea is, or the reality is, you get that over the seed, and it just takes that, it helps the seed through that area of when it starts to germinate, starts to grow, and it just gets it going. So a conclusion of findings, so we created a habitat, so we don't destroy our habitat at all by any sort of cultivations. We don't add the synthetic products. We minimise our herbicide damage by using targeting and adding carbohydrates with our herbicides. Don't use any insecticides, as I said. I aim to feed the soil all the time with green, brown and black food. So the green food is a living plant, the brown food is the decaying plant of the previous crop, and the black food is our compost or farmyard manure. We've improved the organic content of our soils. I know I could stand here and give you the figures and all the rest of it, but I personally believe that it's a bit like we heard this morning about the P testing. If you test your soils at different times of the year, you'll get a different organic content. But basically, we've started off at around nothing or 0.5, and we're up to about 3.5. I heard an interesting statistic lately that for every 1% of organic matter you can improve, you'll save something like the soil will hold an extra 117,000 litres of water. All I would say, I do want to tell you this from my experience. We've just had some massive rainfall events. We had over 3 inches of rain in just over a day on the farm just now in the autumn, and we had no runoff. And I was able to walk out on the fields the following day and still not get any mud on my boots. So, I just think the potential there is huge. So we keep a living root in the soil all the time, as I've said about bare soil. Another motto I have is never let the sun see the soil. We've improved our plant health. We can fight plant diseases with a minimal of effort, really. And finally, some more good news. A recent analysis on the farm carried out by the Herefordshire Rural Hub and sponsored by the EEA and the National Landscapes into nutrient balancing. So what we're trying to do with the nutrient balance is we're trying to get some facts and figures behind the reality of farming in Herefordshire. So we've done our nutrient balance and our whole farm phosphate balance. We calculated that we're minus 2,968 kilograms of phosphate. So I could see that as nothing but a win-win. And that equates to, so we got on there at 33 kilograms per hectare. Put that into perspective, so far we've tested 4,600 hectares of Herefordshire, and we're running at an average of minus 3 kilograms a hectare, which I think in itself is positive, and it shows that things are moving in the right direction. And I feel that once we can get more and more data, we can stand up and be very proud and positive that we're moving in the right direction. That's where I got to. The last thing I'd like to say, we're a small family farm. I bought my own farm. I have to maintain it. I'm not going to fail to stay in business, and the expense of what I'm doing, I think what I'm trying to say is that if support is removed, or if I'm financially up against it, if it means I've got to let my land out for high income to stay in business, which will be intensive arable farming, that is what we would have to do. So, just a passing thought. Thank you very much.
My name is Philip Gorringe. I'm a tenant farmer in the west of the county, midway between Hereford and Hay-on-Wye. And over the last few years, regenerative agriculture, what I like to call farming, to be honest with you, has become something of a mantra for us at Lower Blakemere. It's non-prescriptive, it's guided by principles, and that's basically what farming's been about ever since somebody first started farming. they're principles, government's telling you what to do, trying to keep to accurate data and so on. That's not really farming. But regenerative agriculture seemed to tell me that that was something that I could get involved with, and I can sort of start to explain why that is and how that is. As you can see, a glorious part of the Wye Valley on a rather sunnier day than we've seen lately, but the river is in the middle distance in front of you, so basically everything that runs off our farm will ultimately end up in the river. And therefore we have the obvious responsibilities that go with that. I think it's important to remember with agriculture, farming, the 3 Ps, people, planet and profit. You've got to consider all of them. You can't just ignore part of them. These are communities, we produce food, and we've got to make it happen in such a way that we don't decimate the place on the way. So John's been at this game for a lot longer than I have, so that what I'm going to show you is a collection of mitigated disasters and whatever else in terms of my transition towards some sort of future. But back in 2020, we had a disastrous harvest. You might have remembered, in my case, don't choose to. We had a very wet autumn, and then we had a very dry, very cold spring. And I got crops of wheat up to 3 or 4 leaf dying in rows because they got no roots on them. And the harvest was very poor. At the same time, with our landlord, the Duchy of Cornwall's help, we put together a meeting room and we were looking for a name. And so fairly logically, Bad Harvest Barn was born. And it was a salient reminder to us that farming over the ages has suffered these cycles. You relearn things, you move forward, but sometimes you move back. And both the bank manager and common sense told me that we were looking at a problem that needed to change. And I suppose with the encouragement of my son and our landlords, I came across a book, and it took me 20 acres of combining grass seed to listen to the audio book in one hit, cover to cover. And I sat there and I thought, this is about me. And it was hard going. It was a story of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different outcome. And that was what that was about. So it had to change. So regenerative farming, it does what it says on the cover. Basically, you're trying to do something that is more sustainable. You're trying to save costs. You may suffer a reduction in yield, but your margin should go up, and you are going to be wasting less resource, basically, in the process of producing food. And for us, we're an arable and beef farm. We did a lot of ploughing, and now Ben isn't here, I can use some of his strap lines that he's given to me. But one of the things Ben said to me when I first met him was, why do you plough? And of course, me being bold and aged and all the rest of it, said, well, that's for weed control. And I enjoy it. And he said, so if it was for weed control, how long have you been ploughing? And I said, well, at least 40 years, and my father another 40 before me. And he said, so you haven't got any weeds then, have you? And I thought, that's quite a truism in itself, isn't it? And so the idea is to reduce your inputs, reduce your costs, reduce soil movement, and get the soil biology that we've heard about, the microorganisms in the soil, to start to do some of the work for you. Notably, about 70% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. The organisms in the soil are the things that help get that nitrogen as food for your plants into the soil. A lot of the things that we've done since the 70s were designed to kill those microorganisms. Seed dressings are a classic example. They're a brutal, ignorant chemical which kills everything that we want to work. And so we're looking at soils that have been devalued by years of these sorts of practices. And I mean, I still use seed dressings because I'm struggling to persuade people to give me seed without it for our seed production. but it's a case of mitigation, so hopefully 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The history of the CAP and the government legislation that went before, we were farming based on 70s theories, ammonium nitrate. It masked a hell of a lot of problems, maximum yield. We used to be involved with ICI doing trials as to how much ammonium nitrate we could put on and where the graph flattened out on yield. And we were going for the incremental bits where it's flat. Oh, chuck some more on, it'll be fine. And so now we're starting to learn the error of our ways. And of course, we're price takers. The cost of the stuff is ridiculous. Ukraine really told us what the cost of fertilizers was and how little control we had over it. And being seed producers, we weren't using our organic manures because of cross-contamination of crops. We do have grass in the rotation, which mitigated our activities to some extent, but we were about to pay big style for the problems that we'd made for ourselves, really. So, with the help of our landlords, we embarked on a transition, and I have to say they've been hugely helpful. The Duchy of Cornwall have helped us financially, they've helped us with knowledge exchange. They pay for Ben Taylor Davis to try and keep me on the straight and narrow and give my son Monty enough weapons against me to stop me reverting to my poor practices before. And we're involved with the Ridge to River Landscape Recovery project with the Duchy and Moccas Estate next door to us. And the original photo, Ridge to River, is basically that stripe of land that you could see before you get to the river. So potentially, it's an important thing. We've got various environmental incentives that we can take up, and we do on the farm. We're entered in the SFI, we're entered in mid-tier. It helps, but it's not enough. It doesn't do the job. It'll help us try to do the right thing in the right place, take bits of land that are not productive enough out of production. But in terms of a business model, it's a harder transition than that. And you'll hear a lot of talk about subsidy, especially in the last week. But put bluntly, the government has told you that we can have 5 billion over the next 3 years. What it didn't tell you is we, the farmers, have got to come up with 5 billion to access it. Direct subsidy before was just money in your hand. It's a difficult sum for a business that's not making any money to do. And for a lot of farmers, their resources, their reserves have either run out or are tangibly running low. So, harvest tea, great, isn't it? Sunshine. My son Monty came back from Harper Adams. It's a privilege to work with him. It's good fun. And my wife Heather runs Wiggly Wigglers. It's a team effort, the 3 of us. We're considered to be one of the most diversified farms in the Duchy of Cornwall portfolio. We've got Wiggly Wigglers, we've got Bad Harvest Barn, we've got UK mini trucks, we run a property business, we run a builders. Oh, and by the way, we're trying to transition to regenerative agriculture on a family farm. From a farming point of view, there's me, Monty, and 1 other on about 850 acres all told. So we keep busy while we're at it. Monty's also just started a business called UK Mini Trucks. From a standing start in January, he's now turned over something approaching 400,000 importing and selling Japanese mini trucks to farmers, gamekeepers, and anyone else who'll stand still long enough. Since then, these sorts of diversifications, these are now our reserves to help sustain the farm while we A, transition to regenerative agriculture, and B, transition to a more sympathetic government, if you like, towards food production and food security. We're proud to be part of the Duchy's activities, and I think we're very lucky to have a landlord such as the Duchy who can A, afford, and B, understands people, planet, profit. And it's not just about rent, it's about longevity, it's about the legacy, and it's about what might happen in 50, 100, 150, 200 years' time. Corporate landlords have a much shorter vision on their activities than that. The next slide I'm going to put up with some trepidation, but because I'm a bold idiot, I will. So, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, you'll all be aware that we had a weather event in the county which was pretty serious. Even within the county, it was hugely variable as to what you got. We've been measuring and recording rainfall at Lower Blakemere for 30 years, so we've got pretty good data on it. That 24 hours, we had 5 inches, 125 mil of rain in 24 hours. And I'll put my glasses on for this bit. So just to put that into context, that was 1,250 tonnes of water per hectare in 24 hours. So over the farm, the whole farm, that was 440,000 tonnes of water. And a tonne of water looks like one of those white IBCs in a cage. That's exactly a tonne of water. So 440,000 of those in 24 hours. And our drainage systems and our river have to cope with that, and that was just off our farm. To put that even more into context, our average rainfall is about 35, 36 inches a year. In the year to date, from the 1st of January, we've measured 53 inches. And that equates to, over the whole farm, 4.5 million tonnes of water. So the drainage systems and how farms deal with them, how we manage the land, trying to do the right thing in the right place, trying to keep the soil in the field, can be something of a challenge under those circumstances. And if the weather patterns are going to go on like that, then we're going to have to consider doing different things with fields like that, because you only lose the soil once. It takes far too long to replace it if it's gone. That's without even considering the damage it might have done to wherever it ends up. We try to have, we've got margins, grass margins, and our drainage systems are designed to catch sediment like this, but I'm afraid with 5 inches of rain, you're not catching any sediment under those circumstances. So John showed us pictures of cover crops. This is an example of me learning. So this is a cover crop. It was planted at the right time, but since August we've had a fairly dull, fairly wet autumn, a lack of sunshine. With the benefit of hindsight, what I should have done was put some nitrogen on it and made it grow. It's all there, every plant has grown, and it should be well above my knees. Changing farming practices takes time. I've got 30 years of experience of being an idiot on an old system, and I've just changed the system, and I'm trying to learn it in 3 years and expect it to work. And so from that point of view, it's quite important that when we're talking about the problems associated with modern agriculture, that we give the whole system time to adapt, to work it out, let the scientists find out how to do it, how to change. If we're not careful, we'll do things in the short term which totally compromise the long term. And I feel quite strongly that we have to find out what we're doing. For us, soil testing was key. Indices, which you'll no doubt be familiar with, are a very blunt instrument, and SSM soil testing, so basically finding out everything you've got in the soil, revealed to me that, more idiot points I'm afraid, but we had got a vastly magnesium-dominated soil. Perfectly naturally, it's a geographical thing, but the consequences of that is that when it rains on it, the soil just goes into a muddy clump. It's about 35% clay, so you can imagine what it's like. It wants to be a brick, really, and then it's just a wet brick. And if you look at the indices, our MAG indices was about 1.5, 2 being considered optimum. So I'd always thought, that's all right. These tests showed us that we got about 25 tonne of magnesium a hectare. Critically, what we hadn't got was enough calcium. So we have to apply calcium to redress the balance. Calcium opens the soil up, magnesium shrinks it. We got away with it because we didn't have the rain. More rain, more shrinking, no roots on the crop. That's why the wheat dies. So from our point of view, that means adjustments, gypsum. Another idiot point, my father always taught me only poor farmers use calcium lime. So when we use lime, I always spread mag lime. I'm putting magnesium on a mag-dominated soil for reasons I can't really understand why. Calcium lime's cheaper, for Christ's sake. And here am I thinking, if I'd known this 30 years ago, you know, what would have been? Anyway. Our arable crops, we grow everything for seed. They're all combinable crops. So in answer to an earlier question, virtually none of our crops goes directly for consumption, but we are part of the multiplication chain to produce seed for other farmers to grow crops later on. We grow grass seed, a lot of grass seed in our rotation, which has mitigated our activities over the years, masked them even. And our soil organic matters aren't too bad. They're, depending on the soil, between 2 and 4%. To put that into context, the North American prairies, while they still were prairies, the organic matter content was about 12%. They're now, so, you know, after the 30s, dust bowls and whatever, most of them are less than 1%. Another interesting, in conjunction with the Duchy, we've been doing a lot of carbon footprinting. We have measured our carbon footprint across the farm and what aspects of the farm are giving us any problems. And we've come to the conclusion that if we could raise the soil organic matter content in our soil by 0.01%, I'll repeat that, 0.01%, we then become carbon neutral, including the livestock, including the existing fertiliser usage, diesel usage and so on. So for a very modest increase, we can tick that box. It's not the end of the story, but we can tick that box. We've also been involved with ground source, so we can see the activities that cock it up, for want of a better phrase. So if you have a wet autumn, the map goes completely red as all your carbon disappears, and then you grow a good crop and you see it all come back again, and it's cyclical. So I've always said that farming is an investment of carbon to sequester it. If you sequester more than you invest, then with a bit of luck you might make a profit. But the most disastrous thing is to invest the carbon in growing the crop and then have a crop failure. And so from that point of view, regenerative farming comes back again because we're trying to build resilience, mitigate the idea that the weather causes us crop failures. So one of the easy wins, if you like, was to stop ploughing. You can see the sort of soil we've got. That's on top of the hill at Whitfield. It's pretty strong stuff. Obviously, to plough it takes a lot of fuel. We're moving an enormous tonnage of soil, and then we've got to batter some sense into it, having ploughed it. And for a period of time after we've ploughed it, there is the extreme likelihood that if it rains hard or whatever else, that soil will set off, notwithstanding the fact that we've just destroyed a vast amount of the soil microorganisms within that profile. So that's 9 or 10 inches of soil that we've just upended, giving it the shock of its life. So that was the first thing to go. And we basically sold a lot of machinery. Monty sold my tractor, which was quite sad for me, but I did manage to hide the plough in the back corner of the barn, but it wasn't worth a lot anyway. And so now, during the transition phase, we're still having to move some soil because the soil structure isn't improved enough to direct drill straight away. You have to earn the right to do it. John has, I haven't, so I'm not good enough yet. So that is what's called a min-till drill. It's a tine drill. We've got a lot of stone, and the idea is that we're only moving the top inch or two of soil. We can establish the crop with a lot less fuel, a lot less soil movement, and therefore we're losing a lot less nutrients to the atmosphere. The field is firmer to drive on, it will take rain better, and it doesn't wash away quite so willingly. Oh, sorry, before we go on to cows, we're also working in terms of being a lot more realistic about what we yield. And another of Ben's truisms is, if you're addicted to drugs, you don't go to the drug dealer and say, how much more heroin would you like me to buy? Because you know what the answer is. And as farmers, we were a bit like that with ammonium nitrate. You go to the fertiliser manufacturer or supplier, there's only 2 or 3, and it's really, here's my wallet, fill my shed up, bingo. So by taking independent advice, thinking about it and being more truthful about yield expectations, getting rid of this 70s idea, there's a rubbish piece of crop, I'm going to put more fertiliser on it and try and fail to make it into a good piece of crop. It's a hard lesson for me at my age to learn, but it's probably good that I've got the assistance of my son and landlords to actually keep me on track. Not to mention my wife, who's not known for holding back.
Phil.
No worries. Stabiliser cows. Cows are an important part of the system. We feed the grass seed straw to the cows, so there's no silage made on the farm. They graze in the summer, they calve in the spring. All the calves go to one farmer, so we don't use livestock markets. Stabilisers are interesting to us. We've been using Angus Cross Continentals. Despite the name, a stabiliser is a breed bred specifically for that, and it's one of only 2 breeds that the eating quality, the breeding characteristics of the breed are done by genetic analysis. And the idea is that they are easy care. You have a small calf that gets up and goes. They milk well, and the eating quality is 11 out of 10. And I think you'll hear more about stabilisers. From my point of view, they're friendly. They don't want to kill me in the middle of the night, which is always handy. Bokashi, very, very briefly. Bokashi is a means of fermenting organic waste, which prepares it to be food for the organic bacteria and microorganisms in the soil. So it's fantastic for us. We're working with the idea of composting food waste to use as fertiliser with Pericargo in the city, and we're blending composts and materials to match our soil sample results. So we need phosphate, so we're making an additive that fits the soil profile of the individual field, and they're all different. So from that point of view, we know what we're taking away, we know what we need, we make up a compost to suit that. Bokashi is critical in that, and it's just a miraculous, well, it's not miraculous, it's the oldest idea in the world, but it was invented in Japan to clean up the waterways. Oh, why are we here? To clean up the waterways. And so it comes round, and the thinking is there, and the direct application of Bokashi in the waterway is very helpful. We're lucky enough that when he was the Prince of Wales, King Charles used to come and visit us quite often. He's very interested, very enthusiastic about all things regenerative farming. Being a focused farmer is about knowledge exchange, critical to regenerative farming and modern farming practices, talking to each other, exchanging ideas, not just farmer to farmer, but groups like this as well, having sensible discussions and looking at the problem face to face. Right where I want him, Ben TD in a hole where he can't get at me. But everything is about soil structure, and we're starting to see the benefits of what we're doing. We can see the soil visibly getting better and more manageable. And so even in the short time we've been doing it, I can start to see the benefits. And then just to finish, just to remind you of what a glorious sunset combining grass seed, listening to Dirt to Soil on the radio can look like. That was a picture taken by my wife, and she was quite pleased with it, and I was quite enjoying listening to the book. Thank you very much.